Welcome all you wonderful, beautiful life science students to the next installment in our biochemistry lesson. The last lesson that you might have looked at, we're looking at this whole concept of biochemistry. And what it is what makes me, right? So what do I need to eat and to drink to make all the parts of me, make it really, really well, and to make it function really, really well. So if we had to quickly recap about the last lesson that we did, I want to just quickly go to the board here. All right. We look at our mind map. We are looking here at the molecules of life. And the last lesson, we looked at this concept called an inorganic compounds, what an inorganic compound was. Because remember, we are looking at things that are going to build us and to make sure that we work properly. So the last lesson, what we looked at, when we looked at inorganic compounds, all right, I'm going to just quickly scroll through the words because I'm not going to go through the words with you. I'm going to, as we go through the lesson, I'm going to give you the words that we needed. So the last lesson that we did, we looked at this component called inorganic compounds. And what were they? They were the things that we eat or drink that are, how can I say, they're minerals and water, but they're not living things. They're also usually compounds or elements that are quite small, right? But they play a very, very vital part in our body. And as I said, we looked at water, how important water was in our diet. And when we looked at these things that we call minerals or nutrients, calcium, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, all of those things that play a very, very vital role, right, in our building of our body and how it functions. So today's lesson, we're going to concentrate on the other part that we need, and that is going to be what organic compounds are. Okay, and they're pretty much the opposite of what inorganic compounds. If we look at an organic compound, you need to have in your mind, it's something quite large. They're much bigger than inorganic. And one thing they all have is they all have carbon in them. When we looked at an inorganic compound, we might have seen carbon dioxide, a gas, but the organic compounds that we're going to look at have got lots of carbon. They're really, really big, right? Even though, yes, you need to see them under a microscope. When it comes to, organic chemistry, they're on the large side. We call them a macromolecule. They're also considered to be living things, right? So I usually get those kind of things if I eat a plant, if I eat an animal, right? Those are things where water is an inorganic, which is non-living. So when we look at our inorganic, we are going to look at 4 in the series of lessons that we are going to do. We are going to look at carbohydrates. We are going to look at proteins. We are going to look at lipids. We're going to look at enzymes and probably vitamins and nucleic acids. Today's lesson, we're going to concentrate on our first organic compound, which is going to be carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates, lots of you don't use the word carbohydrates, but you might use it when you say the word sugar or you say the word starch. That's pretty much what carbohydrates are. And when it comes to what they do in our bodies, especially ours, they are our energy source. They're the ones that our mitochondria, when we do the cell, that's a little tiny little organelle inside the cell that is going to take what you eat and it's going to release energy so that you can do the things you need to do, to move, to think, for your body to keep the same temperature, for your brain to work. You need a fuel, like a car needs petrol. The food that you eat, the carbs, are going to be what's going to keep you going. So they're a very important part of your diet. And in South Africa, it's probably a staple food. It's the one type of food that most South Africans do get in their diet. Okay, so now we're going to look at 2 very important terms. These are really, really important. Carbohydrates, organic compounds, are really big things. but they are made of really small things. I've worn a necklace today. It's just a bead. And this is exactly the concept that I want you to get, is that this is a necklace. This is the big structure. But how it was made was putting one single bead to one single bead and joining it up to get something larger. Okay, now we're going to look at that from a terminology perspective. Let's have a look at the two terms. They are very important because they are going to tell you exactly what you need for all of the organic compounds. Now guys, when we look at the term mono means one. Okay? And if we were to build a house and we're going to use bricks, this would be your brick, this one, this monomer. So when we eat a carbohydrate, all right, we need to break it down into its simple mono, into one little piece. Monomer 1, okay? Now, we said that carbohydrates are big. Now, what big things are, like this necklace, is when I take a lot of ones, the monomer, and I put them together, and I make a polymer, because poly means many. So you need to understand the concept often, and I've put this concept often at the top of the slide for you to remember. Mono, the building block, the single unit, and I put those together. It's almost like taking Lego or bricks, and you pack them together, and you make this much larger structure called a polymer. Okay, so always keep that in the back of your mind. Now, carbohydrates are made up of the following three, elements: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now, I want you to have a look at this picture over here. You do not need to learn this. You do not need to learn it. But what you do need to realize is its shape, okay? And if you have a look at it, it's in a ring shape, okay? It's kind of like a ring. And if you look at it, you don't have to take chemistry or anything. What does a C stand for? Carbon. What does a hydrogen stand for? H stands for hydrogen, and the O stands for oxygen. So carbohydrates are made up of carbon. Remember, all organic compounds are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You need to always remember that. Okay, next point. This is really important. That monomer, carbohydrates, the single bead, the building block of any carbohydrate is called a monosaccharide. That's a really big word, but I'm going to break it up for you. Right? Mono means one again. So one little piece. Saccharide means sweet. So when we look at the building block, right? One block that's going to make my carbohydrate, I call it a monosaccharide. One little piece, all right, that is sweet. Now, when we look at these monosaccharides, they have a very, very specific formula. I want you to have a look over here. And it's all to do with their, with their carbon and their hydrogen. So if you have a look over here, let's break down the word. This is a tri. Tri means 3. Now, what does that mean? Have a look here. I have got 3 carbons. Now, the rule states as follows. I'm going to go back one more slide, and I want to show you. Okay. Guys, over here, the ratio of hydrogen to carbon to oxygen is 1 to 2 to 1. Okay? I'm going to put it at the bottom here. Remember, 1 to 2 to 1. I know it's a little bit of math, but I just need you to understand. So if I've got 6 carbons, how many hydrogens? I've got 3 over here. Sorry, let me quickly rub that out. Let me quickly erase it for you. Go. Okay. 1, 2, 3 carbons. Right, so how many hydrogens would I have? If I've got 1, what's 3 times 2? 6. How many oxygens would I have? There we go, 3. So triose means 3 carbons. Have a look at this one. Pentose means 5 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 5 carbons. Then I can 1 to 2 to 1, 10 hydrogen, and how many oxygen? 5 again. Okay, we're going to look at this one. We see this one when we do DNA and RNA. Now this sugar, hexose means 6. So I've got 6 carbons, which means I've got 12 hydrogens, which means I have got 6 oxygens. You don't need to know that. You do not need to know or write all these ones. But what you do need to know is there is a ratio. The monosaccharide has a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. Okay, now what are monosaccharides? Where do you get them? Where do you eat them? What food am I going to find them? Okay, and there are 3. And the first one, fructose, right, found in fruit. All right, so those of you who love fruit sugar, those of you who love apples and bananas and pears and lychees and honey, right, but honey is expensive. I can never afford to buy honey, so we never have honey at home. But those are fructose. That is a source of energy, right? So when you eat it, it gives you energy, fructose. So that's one example of a monosaccharide. See if that's in your diet. Okay, the next one is galactose. What a big name. But lactose, some of you unfortunately might not be able to drink it because you're lactose intolerant, and that's all in milks and dairy products and cheeses and all those kind of yogurts, all those kind of things you're going to get that. Believe it or not, it is a sugar, right? It is a milk sugar. So that is the second one, galactose. And then where most of you are going to get your energy from, right? The most common source is glucose. You're going to get it in your millipap, you're going to get it in your bread, you're going to eat it if you have cereal, you're going to find it in some fruit, you're going to find it in your rice, you're going to find it in your samp, you're going to find it in your potatoes, in your spaghetti. Any of those things, you're going to find glucose. And that is where you're going to get most of your energy from. So what are the 3 monosaccharides? Fructose, galactose, and glucose. And what that simply means is when you take that food and you eat it and your body breaks it down, the smallest part that anything can be is a glucose, a fructose, and a galactose. And when it's in that form, our body wants to absorb it and use it. Because remember, why are we eating? We need to build and we need to function. And here we need the energy. We need that glucose, fructose, or galactose to make our body work properly. Okay, guys, we're going to have a quick little break, and then we'll come back right after this. Welcome back, Life Scientists. I hope you had a nice little break there, and maybe you had a monosaccharide. Did you maybe have a fruit, right? Did you have some sugar? Did you have a little snack? Right, that's what we're looking at. Just to recap, we're looking at molecules of life, biochemistry. What make us? What do we need to be able to be built properly and to function properly? And today, we are looking at this whole concept. In this lesson, we're looking at the concept of organic molecules, and specifically carbohydrates. So just to remind you, before we went off to a break, we were looking at this concept of a monomer, a small, simple, right, a very, very simple sugar, if I can put it. So any kind of carbohydrate that you eat, if I break it down to its smallest part called a monomer. And in carbohydrates, we call that a monosaccharide, one sweet, right, one sweet. And the three examples we looked at were glucose, the most important and a lot abundant. Most of your foods have got that. Fructose that you find in fruit, and galactose in the milk that you drink. Okay, now we're going to have a look at a different concept, but this is easy maths. This is easy maths. What happens if we take one monosaccharide, one of them, and we join it to another one? So have a look, all right? So you remember I said to you, you don't have to look at all of these, know all these C's, H's, and O's. You must recognize that it is a carbohydrate because it has got this ring structure. Now, if we look at it, this one over here is called a monosaccharide. This one over here is called a monosaccharide. When we add two monosaccharides together, we form something called a disaccharide. Now, what does di mean? Di means two. What does saccharide mean? Saccharide means sweet. So we have got two sweets that we are going to put together. So we're now starting to build that polymer. Right? We're starting to take those small blocks and we're starting to build something really large. Now, what kind of foods do you think you might find, right, when you look at a disaccharide? Now, if you have a look here, each of a disaccharide, I want you to have a look on the board here. Each of the disaccharide, one of the parts is always a glucose. Okay? So you can't just mix and match any one. One of them always must be a glucose, and then the other one is one of the three monosaccharides. Either a glucose plus a glucose, or a glucose, see this is what they are, a glucose plus a glucose plus a fructose, or a glucose plus a galactose. And it gives us these different kinds, all right, of foods. Now the first one, when we put glucose and glucose together, we make something called maltose. Okay, there we go. It's called maltose. And I try to put a picture up here of something, can you see here, maltabella, malt. Right, a lot of your porridges. My mother used to make me maltabella when I was young. I didn't enjoy it. I was much more of a Jungle Oats fan, whereas my sister enjoyed the maltabella. I didn't enjoy it. So those of you, maltabella, you're going to find it a lot in your cereals that you eat, in your maize meal that you have, in your pap that you eat, those kind of things you're going to find malt sugar. Okay, so it's a disaccharide. It's made up of two monosaccharides, a glucose and a glucose. All right, now I'm sure you all recognize this one. If I join a glucose and a fructose, I get sugar. What you put in your tea and what you get in your coffee. And where do you get that from? Those of you who live down in KwaZulu-Natal, you should know that because you've filled lots of fields, filled with them. That's sugar cane. So what we've got, those of you take sugar cane and you break it down, and you get the sugar that you're going to put in your coffee or your tea or over your millipap or whatever your breakfast that you're going to have. Remember, disaccharide, two, sweet, very sweet. That's why you're going to put it into your coffees and your teas. Okay, guys, and then the last one, lactose, right? Galactose, so glucose and galactose. We're going to make the most delicious. It's a milk, right? Milk products, milk sugar, and that's our cheeses and our yogurts and amazi and all of those things, our buttered milk. All of those are going to be made from, right, the milk products that we get. So those are all disaccharides. So what do we need? They're a bit bigger. They are 2. They're a bit of a bigger molecule, and our body is going to need to digest that. Okay, remember, monomer, polymer. They are on our road to making them slightly bigger. Okay, now this is really important. Monosaccharides and disaccharides, both of them dissolve in water, and they are sweet to the taste. Now, the sweet to the taste is not the most critical thing. It is if you like some sugar in your coffee. Coffee's bitter. I do like a little bit of sugar in it. But the most important thing, why do we put sugar in our coffee? Because we can stir it and it dissolves. Now, it's not about what it does in our coffee. It's about what it does in us. Okay? So that's really important, is when I break down, digest all these foods, I must be able to take them out of my digestive system, and they must be able to dissolve in my blood. And what is my blood? My blood is water, because that's how I'm going to transport them around the body. So it's not yes, this is really nice that they dissolve in my coffee, or I can have a Coke, because what is Coke? Sugar dissolved in water. But more importantly, what it does inside of me, right? That's what is important. It dissolves in water. It's going to dissolve in the cell. It's going to dissolve in your blood. It's going to move into parts of your body where you're going to need it. And that's going to be a very important fact when we start looking at the cell and how things are going to move around the cell. Okay, so we've got a mono, we've got a di. Now, we're going to put lots of them together. Thousands of glucose. This is how you're going to get the necklace. You're going to, it's only glucose. You're going to take the glucose and you're going to put them together. And you're going to have what we call a polysaccharide. Okay, now poly means many, and saccharide means sweet. And ironically, believe it or not, I'm going to cross it out, because a polysaccharide is usually not very sweet. Okay, polysaccharide, poly, many. Okay, very important. A poly is many, so it means it's a really big molecule that when you eat it, your body has to break it down till it becomes a monosaccharide. Okay, guys, now we're going to look at a few examples, and I've got a few here, but I'm going to look through them one by one. The most common example is going to be starches. They pretty much your breads and your pastas. If you have a look here, it's your rice, it's your potatoes, it's your samp. It's food that you cook and that you eat. It is full of starch. It's plant-based, right? It's not animal products. Usually you'll see it's wheats. It's plant-based, because plants are able to photosynthesize, and they can turn the sun's energy into this thing called starch. Okay, and we're going to eat that. And we need it, right? But what does our body just need to do? We just need to break it down. Okay, so starch. Plants are going to store glucose as starch. Okay, now in the lessons coming to this, we're going to look at cells. And cells, you get a plant cell and you're going to get an animal cell. And when you look at a plant cells, because they don't have a skeleton, they need different ways to keep them upright. And we're going to have a look at cells. If I have to draw a cell here, plant cells usually have got an outer cell wall. This is a cell wall. And we're going to look at it when we look at a cell. And it's strong. It's a strong thing. And it's going to keep the cell up. Because plants, all right, don't have a skeleton to keep them up like us, bones. they're going to need the cells to keep them up. This is quite a difficult concept to understand. Now, this is called a glycogen. Now, when you eat any kind of carbohydrate and your body breaks it down into glucose, you can't keep it in that form. You cannot keep glucose in that form. Your body has to change it. And you'll look at the concepts later on. And what happens is, when you eat carbohydrates and it goes into your blood, your body says, oh no, we can't have so much glucose in here. Change it, change it, change it. So what happens, you have an organ called your liver, and it produces a hormone called insulin. And it says, oh, glucose, no, no. And it takes that glucose out of your blood and it stores it in your muscles and in your liver. And it stores it as glycogen, right? So we store carbohydrates as glycogen. Plants store it as starch. We store it as glycogen. And now I want to go and play a game of football. I want to go and play a game of netball. I want to go running. And I need that energy. My body can take that glycogen that I've stored and change it back to glucose again, right? So glycogen, how I store glucose, right, is a polysaccharide. Now, very important properties. They're not sweet to the taste. That's fine, but very important. They don't dissolve in water, right? We don't want them to dissolve in water. Imagine if you take your rice or you take your potato and it dissolves in water. Then you've got soup. You've got yucky, all right? So you want it. You want your potato to be cooked but firm. You want your rice to be there. You don't want this much, right? So it's very important that it doesn't. And when we look at how things move in a cell, process called osmosis, this is going to be an important concept. How do we stop things from moving in and out of cells? Okay, so guys, just remember, carbohydrates are there for us for energy, right? We need it for energy. If you're a cell wall, all right, in plants, you need it to keep upright. And I don't know about you, I don't like gochas. Have you ever stamped on a locust or a gocha and it goes crunch? All right, that outer skeleton is also a polysaccharide, and that is called chitin or chitin. Some people say different ways. So you know when they go crunch, that's what you're breaking. You're actually breaking a polysaccharide. Now the fun part, I enjoy this part, right, of the carbohydrates, and that is the food test. And what is a food test? A food test is something that we're going to do to see if that whatever we're testing for is present. So let me explain to you. So I'm going to give you a little beaker, and you don't know what it is. It's got something in, and I want to say to you, has it got glucose in? And you're going to say, I don't know, ma'am. So I say, no, we're going to find out. Let's take that little beaker. And we put, I'm going in the beginning, you're going to put glucose in it, so you can maybe put apple juice, or you can put grape juice, or you even can get glucose powder. And you put it in a test tube, and you stir it with water. Then you take Benedict solution, and it's blue, right? It's blue. And you add a few drops, and then you put it in a water bath. That's what a water bath is. We heat the water up so the reaction can happen quite, all right, quickly. And if there is glucose, have a look at this, orange. How can something blue change to orange? It's called a universal indicator. Benedict solution will always say to you, if there is glucose present, it will change color. And it actually has quite a color range, right? So that's what it looks like, no matter what glucose you put in there. And if it's got a little bit, it will change to green. If it's got a little bit more orange, but if it's full of glucose, it's going to turn to what we call a brick red or an orange. So if you, whatever you're testing, if it stays blue, no. Okay, so now I know that it's got glucose in it. Okay, what other food are we going to test? We're going to test for starch. Starch isn't as exciting, all right, as the Benedict solution, but what we're going to use is we're going to take any food group again, and I'm going to use something called iodine solution, and it's brown, all right? Have a look at here. All right, it's a brown color. And when I put it on any kind of starch, use your bread at home. It's amazing, all right? It goes this color immediately. It changes to what we call a blue-black or a dark purple. I'm going to write here. Very often, right, they like you to use the word blue-black, one word or two words, but that's a color, right? Blue-black. Can you see that? Right, that's the color that it's going to change. So if you test something and it's brown originally, and it changes to blue-black, you can say to yourself, okay, this food has got starch in it, so I know that it is a carbohydrate. Okay, guys, time for a little wee break. We'll see you just now. Welcome back, Life Sciences. I hope you had a good break. Did you perhaps have a polysaccharide, a disaccharide, or a monosaccharide to eat during your break? I hope so. Okay, what have we done so far? Just a quick recap. We're looking at the molecules of life, what makes us and what makes us function. And we know that there are two important groups, inorganic compounds and organic compounds. And today we're looking at organic compounds, really big molecules that we need in our diet, and we're looking specifically at carbohydrates. Okay, so let's try and see a few questions that we could possibly ask on the carbohydrates. Not very often this is integrated with all of the ones, so we're just going to pick out a few of the questions that you could possibly get. Okay, the first question we're going to start off with is our good old multiple choice. And our question is, glucose and fructose are examples of what? Now, if we look at glucose and fructose, they were right at the beginning. They were our mono. So you need to know that. So what are we looking for? A is proteins. No, we haven't even done proteins today, so that was a bit of a giveaway. B, C, and D are the work that we have done today. So let's start. Are there monosaccharides? I say to you, glucose and fructose are monosaccharides. That means they cannot be a disaccharide or a polysaccharide. So glucose and fructose, our answer would be B. Okay, so for the next table, all right, for the next question, I'm going to put a statement forward each time. And you need to read what the instructions say. Let's go through the instructions. It says, decide if each of the following statements about carbohydrates, so you need to, it's all the stuff that we have today. There are two things that you have to consider each time. Number one, is it true or false? So you need to decide and tick in the appropriate box. So you don't write T or F, they've asked you to tick. Now, the question has not finished. It says to you, if it's false, you must write the correct word or words in the correction box to replace the word underlined in the statement. Okay, so that sounds like a lot of things to do. Let me show you what I mean by this. Okay, so my statement is cellulose, which is a polysaccharide in plants, okay, because we know that, is an energy storage carbohydrate. So first of all, I need to tick, is it true or false, found in plants. Yes, it is found in plants, but it is not an energy storage. It is a structural. It builds structure. Okay, it builds. So put a tick near where it is. So I'm going to write here, it is false. And the correction is energy storage is incorrect. It is a structural component. That means it builds. So if you could come up with something, even if you didn't say structural, you try to understand that it's involved in the building of the cell wall. Okay, so there we go. First question. Here's my statement. Fructose, right? Fructose, we know it's a monosaccharide, is the main carbohydrate found in milk. Fructose starts with F, which I said to you is fruit sugar. Okay, so we've got our answer here. So is it true or is it false? It is false, right? Milk is wrong. What must we replace milk with? There we go. Found in fruit. So milk is wrong. We need to replace it with fruit. Okay, next statement. Okay, that's the same one. All right, polysaccharides, many, are insoluble. That means they do not dissolve in water. That is quite correct. That statement is true. We put a tick there. Remember I said they're the big ones. The big ones don't dissolve in water, so we won't have anything in the correction place. My statement is, when sucrose, what is sucrose? That is a disaccharide. That's my sugar that I put, in my tea, undergoes hydrolysis. Now, what hydrolysis is breaking down. Okay? So when I break it down, okay? And it even says here, it breaks down into glucose and fructose. So what is sucrose? You need to understand it's a disaccharide. And what is it made up of? Glucose and fructose. Now we need to think, yes, I know glucose, but is it fructose? Yes, it is. All right? Is it fruit sugar or is it malt sugar? I know that it's fruit sugar. It's my sugar cane. And my answer is then going to be true. Okay, next question. Disaccharides, my two, have a hydrogen to oxygen ratio of 3:1. No. What is my ratio? Always 2:1 in a mono and a disaccharide. So I know that is wrong. I'm going to click false. And then I'm going to write 3:1. I know is incorrect. It must be 2:1. All right, so there's the kind of questions, just a true and false statement, right? And make sure you read the question. Tick, and if it was false, you had to give a reason. Okay, our next question is going to involve food tests. Let's have a look at the question. It says, study the diagrams below of food tests, and it tells you that it's a food test, and it tells you that it's an organic compound, all right? So here we've got a picture. Now, if we look at the picture, each picture gives us an idea of what we're going to test for. Here, you are going to see that it says it's iodine solution and that it's orange. And here we are testing for sugar. And if we're looking at this, what's the sugar we're going to look for? I need to say in my mind already, all right, it's glucose. So already when you look at the question, start to see, is the picture telling me a story? Do I know what it's going to tell me? Okay, so let's see what kind of questions we can ask here. Right, so the question is, which organic compound is being tested for? Okay, so now it's iodine, that number A. Iodine tests what? They haven't given me an example of the food, but I know that iodine is a universal, indicator for, what would number A be? Starch. Okay, and if I'm testing for sugar over here, remember, by the process of elimination, really, if one is starch, what would the other one be? Okay, so the number B, if we look at number B, right? Number B would be glucose. Why do I know that it's glucose? Because I've got a water bath, right? And it tells me that I am testing for sugar, Okay, now it wants to know, how do I know that? So let's have a look, right? So it says, name the chemical that's used to test for sugar. Okay, so what's the chemical? This is one question. They're separate from each other. So what exactly did I put over here? And my answer is going to be Benedict's solution. Now I'm going to put another name here because some schools, right, another one that we use, don't use it so much anymore, but they still do. It's also blue. It's called Fellings A and B, right? And why Benedict's is easier is Benedict's is just one bottle. But maybe your school has Fellings A and B. And that just means you need to use the same amount of A mixed together with B, and exactly the same thing is going to happen. It's just a different way in which we can use it. Right, now the last one. It says, give the positive color changes for the following. So what would happen if the orange iodine, if there was starch present? What color does it change? And we know that it is blue, black. Okay, because iodine changes from the orange or the brown to blue, black. Sugar, when I test for sugar, I'm going to use Benedict's. And what color is it? It is blue. And if there's a positive change, right, there's two words you can use here. You can say orange, or you can say brick red. Those are two acceptable phrases that we use. Okay, now the last question. I've given you 3 diagrams. Now, I remember I said to you, you don't need to know them. You don't, but you do need to recognize the different things. I've given you 3 different kinds of carbohydrates. And what I want you to do is I want you to tell me which does each one belong to, an example of each. I want you to put in the table, but I'm going to do it over here. Right, number A has got 2. Can you see that? So it is a disaccharide. Sorry. All right, and any of the choices that you could make, maltose, sucrose, and lactose. All right, number B is 1. 1. So it's a monosaccharide. And what were my 3 examples? Glucose, fructose, and galactose. Could you use any of those? What's my last one? Many. So what would it be? A polysaccharide. I can't go into that corner because I think I'm almost going over the lady who's doing all the different. So I'm going to take an eraser. Don't want to go over the lady's face. Thank you, Nicolene. All right, and we go at the top here. Polysaccharide. And our examples are starch, glycogen, you could say cellulose, and the last one, chitin. All right, guys, that is all that we're going to have in store for you today. I hope that you are going to now go and have some polysaccharides or a monosaccharide for lunch or dinner. I hope you understood these concepts, and we will see you next time.